You're listening to QCast, presented by Qcella Media. Please consider giving generously to Qcella's nonprofit mission. To find out more about our mission and to make a donation, visit our website at qcast.qcella.org. Your tax-deductible donation will help us continue bringing you quality podcasts just like this one.
I may be bruised, but I'm not broken. You can't take away my soul. You tried to tell me I don't count, but I know in my heart that's not true. So you cannot take me down that path. I'll make it without you. I may be bruised, but I'm not broken. My life counts for something, and you wake up and I'll be gone. You'll know that you were wrong.
Welcome to my show, Shades of Gender. I'm your host, Terry Ryan. Thank you for listening. This week and every week, we'll be talking about gender identity, including the transgender, cross-dressers, and non-binary gender individuals who self-identify within these groups. The definition of these individuals are often misused and certainly misunderstood. Our goal is to identify this and these groups, listen to their stories, and their journey in life to get a better understanding of who they are and how they're doing in life. And in spite of how the media may characterize and what others may select as their definitions of what these labels represent, our goal is to get to know the real people behind these definitions. So welcome to my show. And today I'm very excited to have Lisa Middleton. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Terry, it is a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for all of the work that you have done. It is truly appreciated.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, Lisa is she's living in Palm Springs now, and is someone that I met 4 or 5 years ago. Sat down, I called her. She was gracious enough to sit down with me, and I was talking about doing an event, I think Stiletto. It was called the Red Stiletto event for for cross-dressers and transgender and anyone who wanted to buy shoes and do a girls' weekend. And I loved her because she said, we talked for about an hour, and then she said, Terry, I that sounds like a wonderful concept, but I'm very busy doing about 1,000 other things. And she was very clear on point to tell me that that's when you're doing your neighborhood campaign. So I'm going to back up here a minute. Would you, for our audience, give us an idea of where you identify on the gender scale? And I must tell you also that Lisa Middleton is currently on the Palm Springs City Council, and one of the first transgender, I just gave away how you're going to self-describe, but you can fill it in, woman in the country to get elected to a public office, and also the first in Palm Springs from 2 years ago?
2017, I was elected. I became the first transgender person elected in the state of California to a non-judicial office. About a decade ago, Vicki Kolakowski was elected to the Alameda Superior Court, and she is still sitting and doing incredible work on the Alameda Superior Court.
So there's, to your knowledge, 2 elected officials within
There is a third, and I apologize for forgetting his name, but he was elected to one of the community college district board of trustees here in California. Currently, there are about 15, 16 individuals who are transgender who hold elective office in the United States.
It's finally in due time that this group is being acknowledged, and quite frankly, anyone who's right for the role to be acknowledged.
Right.
You know, it's beyond that. So the best person for the job. You know, what I want to do with you is, before we get too active in what you're doing in the community and politics and what you've done for Palm Springs and for the larger transgender gender identity population is to, it's something I don't know, and I know a little bit about, but not a lot, is your story. Because you are a very interesting woman. And so tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what your family life was like, and what it was like before you transitioned. And
Sure. I think all of us who are transgender have a story, and mine is probably very much like most others. And there are some elements of our stories that are absolutely always the same. But I grew up in East Los Angeles, a working class neighborhood. My father was an iron worker. My mother stay-at-home mom. I was the oldest child in a family of 3 children. I was someone who was academically inclined and enjoyed school, enjoyed all of those things that go with academics, and was pretty good as a student. I was probably 3 or 4 when I realized there was something that wasn't connecting in the way it did with everyone else, and had absolutely no idea what the words were for that, or where to connect those to anything. What I quickly concluded was a few things. I was the only person in the world who had ever experienced those feelings, and I must make sure that no one else in the world ever learns that I have those feelings.
right. So those feelings were what? Being different, feeling like you
First being
didn't fit
different,
in.
and then second, very clearly identifying with those things that are associated with women and girls. And
Did you have brothers or sisters in your house?
I had one brother, one sister.
Okay, so you had one on either side. So you're saying then at like 3 or 4 years old, you get excited about, like I always loved clothes, and I loved taking my dolls and putting them into clothes because I like clothes, and I liked hair, and I liked to cut their hair. Poor little baby Thumbelina was just, I don't know, cut her hair. But would you say that that was more interesting to you, like even in the toys or things you had, or was it just more of just wanting to be around or watching girls?
I'm more identified with women. I loved sitting on the sidelines of a room where my mom and aunts would be talking, and their conversations just seemed far more fascinating and interesting to me than anybody else's conversation.
So you like to hang out with the girls?
Yes.
Right. And
it was, so you
no interest really with like what the guys are talking about. I was just kind of hanging out with your mom and your sister.
And as I started to make friends, and growing up, certainly had some male friends, but I found I made friends easier with girls, and as an adult, that was very much the case.
So you always had a lot of, I guess, went back to your dating as you got older, but you then had a lot of girlfriends that were friends, necessarily. I always ask about the cross-dressing aspect of it because, it's not for everyone. Not everyone cares about clothes, that much. But I do find a lot of the cross-dressers, of course, and then people within the cross-dressing to transition that did start liking clothes, but it's not a prerequisite. From what I can see, you're not really that interested in it.
It was clothes, yes. Women's clothes, but your audience can't see me now. I'm in a sweater or scarf, and a pair of slacks.
Right, well, you're tailored. You're you're a tailored like dresser.
So that works for me.
Right.
Sparkles and jewels and things like that. It's just not my style.
Well.
But every woman has her own style of how she wants to appear and what works for her. But to go back to the youth, one of the things that I could connect with the guys is I did like sports, and it was an incredible shock when I would be around them as they were playing things, because the conversations there just totally appalled me.
So you mean between the athletes or the
yeah.
people playing,
I
what
mean,
they were
just
saying about the
about
game
women,
or about women?
and life and everything else. I was just, oh, good
So
God.
you're looking at it like from a girl's standpoint.
Yes, and I'm
right,
sitting there and thinking, this is awful.
right, and then you're
But
not
you
even.
can't say, you have no words to use there.
So you
but
found it offensive. A lot of what they were saying
Sure.
was offensive.
Absolutely.
Right. So you really felt even probably more disconnected with the boys.
So
Right.
I'm, again, academically inclined. I'm in the library. I'm about, public library, about 11, 12 years old. I'm in the biography section, and I find the biography of Sandy Koufax, the great pitcher for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I'm reading that, and then I'm going through the shelf just a little bit farther, and next to the letter K in the alphabet is the letter J, and I find Christine Jorgensen's biography in our little public library. And where I had heard that name, I couldn't place, but it was probably one of those conversations between my mother and my aunts where they, I have no doubt, said something, can you believe this crazy person?
Wow.
But as soon as I saw that spine that had Christine Jorgensen's biography on it, I knew I needed to read that book.
So you didn't know the name at the time, who it was?
I did not. I knew there was something,
Right.
and I pulled that
It's like
book off
divine
the shelf,
intervention, right? It just
and
like it opened up
was-
and it was right there, right?
and it was totally, completely opening up.
It was. So that was a role model to you.
That was the role.
That gave you a voice for your inner self to
It
be
told
able
me-
to say, it's okay.
it
There's
told-
something else going on. I'm not
It didn't tell me it was okay. It told me that I was not the only one.
Right.
Then I started, again, going back to the libraries, and I started doing all of the reading. Now, this would have been the 1960s. And there was a lot of literature on the subject of what was then referred to as transsexualism. And if you would read that academic literature, which I did, 15, 16 years old, and I'm delving deep into...
You must have been a straight A student, too.
I was,
Yeah,
I was an okay student, but the literature was all around the subject of, well, is this person a transvestite or is this person a transsexual? Mm-hmm. And trying to define for physicians how you would diagnose which one is which. And I'm sitting there trying as a young person to figure myself out.
Wow.
The other thing I will say about the literature then, and something that truly had an impact on me, those articles were pitying people. They were describing someone who was weak, someone who had this different condition. And if you should be compassionate to those folks who are so poor off that they would have to suffer through this condition. Mm. I never wanted to be pitied in my life for anything.
So it made you, how did that make you feel when you read
It made me confused, and it also made me angry.
Yes, I would think.
And that anger probably comes out more in these days, because what was also inherent in all of that literature, but it was also how transgender people were treated in those days. There was no conversation about female to male. It was, and all of the references to women were misogynist. Women are weak. Women are hysterical. Women can't hold positions of authority or responsibility or any of those other things. And what I took away from that was, if I ever wanted to be anything, what I had to do was to keep who I was a secret and not let anyone know
Interesting.
what was going on.
Well, you were in hiding, and your intellect said to you that you needed to stay in hiding and wait for society to catch up a bit.
Oh, I didn't think society would ever catch up.
I think it's starting to, though, don't you?
But I think it has.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've been out for a while, but, I do have to ask you, so the book, I call it Feminism, the early, I'm the second generation of feminism, but I have to tell you, when I was around 11 or 12, of course, I read The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan, and always found it, it was a must to me. And I've always worked myself in male-dominated industries, and just always felt I could do it as good as they could. So I understand that what's interesting, though, what I take out of this is your, and I thank you for your honesty and your clarity, is your self-identification as a little girl, as a woman, really from a woman's perspective, because as you were saying, that you were looking at it much like I would, you were already feeling empathetic toward the journey that women needed to take, and as a woman or as a little girl. So that says it all right there. And also, I think your intellect to look at early on, isn't that something to, because I did read about the subject matter early on too. I always thought it was interesting, especially the transsexual, of course, and then transvestite, which, now we're saying crossdresser and transgender.
Well, back in the old days, in the libraries, we had card catalogs.
Right. The Dewey system, wasn't it?
Yes.
Dewey Decimal System.
And if you went into the card catalog, it was transvestite, Transvaal, and transsexualism. Well, the Transvaal is a region in South Africa.
I was going to ask you, did I miss that?
I don't know how many
one?
books I checked out on the Transvaal, because someone would come up behind me and start to look over my shoulder, and I was afraid they were seeing either one of the words, and so I would immediately flip that card to the Transvaal and then go find the librarian and ask her for this crazy reference to Johannesburg.
Right. So that's hilarious. That's really funny.
It's
like, you're right. It's like it's like, oh no, there's another person, and there's always that person standing behind you at the worst moment, right?
Of course.
I mean, of course. So, so let's go forward. So what did you do? You're in hiding. You're saying, it's, I'm not going to, I'm going to be who I am, but I'm not going to let the world necessarily see who I am. And you ended up getting married and having kids and really living much of your life in your as your male self, or in a male form.
What I found myself doing, and I have two absolutely stunningly beautiful, accomplished children, and I. Along with meeting my wife, the best things that have ever happened. How long
have you been together with your wife now?
Cheryl and I have been together for 19, almost 20 years now.
Long time. How did you two meet?
We met through
mutual friends.
Accidents and friends, and so it was.
And she knew by the time that you got married that were you already in transition, or?
When Cheryl and I met, I had fully transitioned.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But it was, I threw myself in my work and did what a lot of people do. You try to find some other outlet. And what ultimately, we all know, when you repress something and try to repress it, that takes an incredible amount of energy. And I reached a point in my life where professional accomplishments were coming in.
You were working for the state of
I
California,
was.
right?
I worked in for the state workers' compensation, ran claims statewide for approximately 10 years.
Which is a fairly good-sized job. I mean, that was a fairly busy, and you were in Sacramento, I take it? Is that where you
I
lived,
was
or?
actually in San Francisco, which was when I came out, actually. But no matter what I accomplished, no matter what was going on, I could not get rid of what I wanted to be. And
how did that present it to you? Were you getting depressed, or were you getting more angry, or were you just getting
depressed,
more unhappy? Right.
and I'm told by some folks and colleagues that there was an anger that went away. I would sit in meetings and look at the women in the room and just be in awe of who they were, and so incredibly wanting to be a part of that group of people. I love espionage novels, and I almost describe it at times as being the spy behind enemy lines who has to pretend to be the other side and wonders if you are ever going to get home.
Right.
Right. And finally simply ran out of energy to hold it.
Did you have as you said, you ran out of energy over time? Was there like a turning point, an incident that happened, or just like you said,
it was
tired?
It was a buildup of different things, and
Were you married still at the time when you to your first wife?
Yeah.
And your kids were how old when this really started?
When
to
I
implode?
ultimately came out, my kids were very young. They were 6 and 9.
And how did you handle that conversation with your wife? I'm sure your kids are too young to really.
Well, it was a conversation that took place over the course of a few years, and ultimately.
Did you kind of deal with her in terms of?
No, we had other issues besides this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, a lot of people do in marriages. I've been through.
We had separated. We were on the course to finally divorcing, and we took our time with that. But this was difficult, as you can imagine. Ultimately, she saw someone in for aid with her, and who convinced her that this was not something that could be changed. It was real, and that is you're going to have to accept that. That took time.
So the person she saw, the therapist or the professional,
it took time
side.
For her to come to grips with that.
Well, it was also the kids too, and she was probably thinking, "Gee,
sure.
What does this do to your 6 and your 9-year-old in terms of being raised with two moms?"
Ultimately, we sat down with my 2 kids and had the toughest hour of my life.
How old were they at the time when you?
Again, 6 and 9.
Oh, when you talked to them about the divorce or your
talked to them about who I was.
Wow.
And
what does the 6 and 9-year-old understand? What do you feel? What's your takeaway on that?
They understand love. They understand that they are loved and that you are loved. What I tried to do over the course of the years following that is to make sure that as much as possible, this was my issue. It was not theirs. And I was a parent, and I had an obligation to them as a parent. So they've had clearly their tough days and their tough times as they've come to grips with that. And now it's just, this is who one of my parents is. And our relationship is wonderful and gratifying.
Many years have passed. I mean, they were so young when you told them. They probably, as they got older, maybe understood more. Do you think they just always felt loved and protected, and you were who you were. You were their parent.
So.
Yeah. and you so after the initial conversation, which obviously the most difficult conversation, like you said, the most difficult 1 hour to tell your 6 and 9-year-old that you know who you are. So after that, you're saying though throughout the years, divorce can be difficult anyway. So but you've just your relationship with them just continued to grow from there, which is
they had to grow up. They have, and they're both very successful educators.
Are they?
Yes.
Yes, and they both were like you were academic. Well, we know. I mean, I know, and you know, that there's, at least in my experience over the past 6 years since I've worked in the community, how many people on the scale internationally, somewhere on that scale, and not everyone wants to transition, and not everyone has your story, and people are at different levels, and but that are either at some point identifying with the opposite gender, either in some way, and they decide for whatever works in their life or how strong it is to live either in their current gender or to transition or to try to make both work. But there's what do you think? Millions across the world? I mean, it's not like, for you to feel all alone. It's so, in a lot of the people I've spoken to say I was all alone. And, then you find out like they opened up the door and like half their block, Well,
one of the things that I find amazing is truly, as I was getting ready to come out, I thought, oh gosh, I will have no friends. I will lose all of my friends. And I did lose a few here and there.
Well, right. Some people can't deal with it.
But not very many. What I found is, as an authentic person, I make friends so much easier.
Right.
Because now I'm true to who I am. And when you're not real, if you're trying to hide something, people detect that. They don't necessarily know what it is, but they detect that there's something that is missing that I'm not seeing in this individual.
Which I think comes across as being disingenuous or phony, or they don't know.
You don't
right?
know what it is.
It's like, I don't believe that, and so it's harder to relate to people. So as you're relating, you are doing it as you, and you're much more comfortable. And I'm sure your relationships have continued to be much more genuine and more fulfilling for you.
Incredibly
right?
more.
And your relationship, right, with your wife, with Cheryl, with your kids, which you've had. But, we're going to have to wrap up here soon. I do want to get to, since you're on City Council and, just, what you're doing within the city of Palm Springs and a little bit about what your aspirations are in terms of continuing, which appears to be a political career, of which you're off to a great start. I mean, there's so much you've done that we didn't even touch today, and I'll have you back to discuss more, because I really would like to talk about how you kind of started before you became city council. It just didn't happen overnight. But where are you today? What are you seeing?
Today I have two incredible commitments. The first is having been elected to the wonderful city of Palm Springs City Council. We have here one of the most diverse, incredible, successful communities that anyone can live in, and I could talk for hours about why it is such a fabulous place to live. But as a member of City Council, our issues are very straightforward, making sure that we have the police and fire resources that we need to protect our community, that our streets are paved, that they are safe to be on, that we collect the trash every week, that our budget is balanced, that we can pay for the commitments that we have made. Those are bread and butter issues that I don't care if you are on a city council in the most conservative corner of the most conservative state in the country, or you're here in Palm Springs. There are things that are just basic to carrying out municipal services.
What is it? The old thing, protect, part of the Constitution, right? Protect those that we serve.
Palm Springs is a community that has demonstrated that diversity and inclusion is good for the people in that community. It is good for the soul of that community, and it is also incredibly good for the economy of the community. So every opportunity that I get to be out talking about Palm Springs values, California values, and the importance of diversity and inclusion, I'm going to take advantage of that.
Do you want to do my red shoe stiletto?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Still no, right?
So, and I'll come back to my kids again for a moment. The students that they're teaching in middle school and high school today were born in this century and will reach their most productive parts of their lives in 2050. We need to be building an economy and building a culture that is going to succeed in 2050, not looking back to 1950 and trying to live that era all over again. And from time to time, I get to talk about why the values of California and the values of Palm Springs are the ones that are going to resonate in 2050.
Wow. There you go. Well, I think that's very strong, and I respect what you're saying. And it's a new world that we're in, and it's time for people to open their minds and be inclusive.
Yep.
And understand people's ways of life. And I always say that being transgender or cross-dresser is the last taboo of our society. It's still largely misunderstood. And I think to have such a strong voice as being the woman that you are is very, very helpful. And I wish you, best of luck continuing with City Council. We're happy to have you on City Council. I've been out in Palm Springs since 1984, and I absolutely love this town, and I'm really happy with the direction it's going and whatever else you decide to pursue. And I'd love to have you back.
I would love to come back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for
so
everything
much.
You are doing for our community.
I'm committed. Thank you very much for being here. Without my guests like you, I couldn't have a show. I want to thank you all for joining me today. I really am humbled to be part of the conversation on gender identity and invite you to keep listening. You can find previous episodes of shows on kgay106.5.com. I also do want to thank Coachella Media for giving me the opportunity for this discussion. And again, Lisa, thank you so much, and happy holidays to you.
Happy
Thanks.
holidays.